So, welcome to today's Scrum Pulse. I am Lindsay Valsina here at Scrum.org. And today I have with us Jason Malmstadt and Robb Pieper from Responsive Advisors. They are two of our professional Scrum trainers. And we're going to talk about why Scrum isn't working. So, in your organization, you might be practicing Scrum and maybe just going through the motions and kind of like, this isn't working for us. So we're going to dive into some of that today as to why that may be, and this should be a great discussion. So next slide, please. Okay, some quick guidelines here. So your microphones are muted. However, we do encourage you to ask questions. So as you have questions, please utilize that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get those questions answered at the end of the session. We're going to have some time for Q&A. This session is being recorded and the slides will also be available within 24 hours. So no need to take frantic notes. You will get a copy of the presentation. So next slide. Okay, very quickly about Scrum.org. We are the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber back in 2009. And our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. And we do that through our professional Scrum training, certifications, and our ongoing learning. And you'll notice, you probably already noticed that on our website, there are a lot of free opportunities to learn and keep that learning going beyond the classroom and beyond when you're certified. So please take advantage of that. Seems like you already are since you made it here today. And I hope that today's session plays an important role in that learning journey. So with that, I would like to pass it over to Jason and Robb to introduce themselves and get us started.
Sounds good. Thanks, Lindsay. Rob,
Hi.
would you like to go first? You're on the
Yeah,
top
why
of the
not?
slide.
I'm at the top of that slide. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. Hi, everybody. I'm Rob, Robb Pieper. I've been a professional Scrum trainer apparently since 2013. I just looked this up. It's, I guess, been a while now. I've taught a variety of classes. Actually, I taught over 300 classes, which I just also recently learned going through some data. But yeah, been teaching Scrum a while. I'm a big, passionate fan of improving businesses and getting better outcomes. And I've been doing Scrum a while, so I definitely understand quite a bit of the ways it fails people and p ways people struggle with it. So passionate about this subject and happy to be here.
Sounds good. Hey everyone, my name is Jason Momstead. As it says there, I've got over 20 years of product development and agile transformation experience. What that means is that I've been working on developing products. I started my career developing healthcare products for about the first decade. And then when I learned about Scrum, I still tell the story pretty much every class I teach is that my first day on the job, my manager took me to a hallway lined with post-it notes and said, "Oh, assume you're familiar with Scrum." And I said, "Nope, what's that?" Because I was not lucky enough to learn about Scrum in school, and quickly found that Scrum resonated with my personality, where I don't like to have zero plans, but I don't like to have rigid plans that, down to the minute either. And so Scrum really resonated with my personality and found that I was pretty good at helping other teams start to use it. So been using it ever since. When I'm not working, I like a lot of what I call nerd properties. So Marvel, Star Wars, Zelda, all that good stuff. That slide says Wicked soundtrack is currently on loop. I think I made that when the last movie came out. It's not quite on loop anymore, but it is quite a frequent play of mine. And yeah, I frequently travel to Kenya. I'll be traveling there on Saturday, actually. So that's a little bit about me. Let's talk about our agenda for today. You are here because we're on the agenda slide, of course. We're going to first talk about what we mean when we say Scrum isn't working. We've been talking about this for a while now. We've gotten some interesting feedback. What do you mean Scrum isn't working? It's not Scrum that's failing, it's you that's failing, and all that kind of good stuff. So we'll talk about frame up what exactly it is we're talking about. Today we're going to focus on three main what we call misfires, things that just aren't going well with the Scrum framework that we've seen, and I think, Rob, we've lived out all three of these in one way, shape, or form, either as coaches or I know I've lived out some of these actually in practice in my earlier in my career. After we go through all three of those misfires, we're going to kind of summarize up what to do next. We're going to talk about that a little bit as we go through each misfire, but then we'll sum it up at the end. And then we should have lots of time for Q&A, as Lindsay mentioned. So please do use that Q&A button. Please save the chat box for just other things. If you have a question that you'd like to be answered, please hit that Q&A button. All right, these slides will be provided at the end of the session as well as some other materials as well. So let's jump right in. What do we mean when we say Scrum isn't working? Here are some phrases that I've heard plenty of times. I've probably uttered some of these phrases at some point. You just hear, point blank, the most obvious one, Scrum isn't working. And what that often means, if you dig into it a bit, well, what do you mean by that, right? Is that we're not seeing the outcomes that we are hoping for with Scrum. We're not seeing better results. We're not seeing more users use the product. We're not seeing higher engagement time, or fill in the blank with whatever business outcome metric that you're hoping to see improve. And I think this is important because, and just like the other phrases on here, well, Scrum isn't solving our problems. When you dig into that, you might find an assumption that Scrum is there to solve your problems. Scrum is a framework that has a radical focus on transparency, gives you lots of opportunities to inspect and adapt, but it doesn't just solve your problems. You can't just install Scrum like a software package and expect your problems to go away. It does reveal them, it shines a flashlight on them, it rolls up the rug and look at all the stuff we've swept under here. But it's not going to solve your problems for you. And so just the same thing with Scrum isn't helping us, right? Scrum should be helping you help yourselves to fix the systems that cause whatever problems we're discussing in the first place. So when we talk about Scrum isn't working, that's kind of the level we're talking about today. Sort of at the macro level, Scrum isn't providing the big picture results that we're hoping for. What we're probably not going to focus on so much today, unless it comes up in the Q&A, I suppose, is, well, my retrospective, this particular structure isn't working very well, or the questions we're asking at Daily Scrum are leading off topic, or things like more at the micro level of like how to improve this particular event, or how to, improve this particular mechanical application of Scrum. That's not where we're looking today. We're looking more big picture. And those other problems, the smaller micro ones, are very valid to discuss. And perhaps we could do another webinar on one of those. If we get a ton of questions later about how do I improve my retro, maybe we'll do another webinar about how to improve the retro. But we're going to look at, big picture, macro level. How can Scrum help us improve our outcomes? All right. Anything to add there, Rob, before I move into our first misfire?
Nope.
All right. Short and sweet. So here are the three misfires that we will discuss today. I'll kind of give you a preview of coming attractions. The first one is that Scrum becomes a rigid process where we just follow A, then B, then C, and expect the same thing to work every time, and no deviations from what we've defined as our Scrum process. Okay. The second one is a powerless product owner. We've talked about the product owner accountability, and this person, if they don't have the accountability and the authority to actually drive their product towards a product vision, that's going to cause some problems. You may feel like Scrum isn't working or Scrum is failing you at that point. And then finally, the third one we'll talk about is a siloed or a non-cross-functional team, a team of specialists in one area that can't deliver end-to-end value. Okay, so those are three misfires we're going to talk about today. And like I said before, start filling those Q&A boxes as you have questions. So with that, Rob, why don't you talk to us about Scrum as a rigid process?
Yeah, that'd be great. So, first of all, with Scrum, it is a way to be agile. And I mean, that word itself is overloaded, but let's use a synonym: nimble, flexible, responsive. When you have a rigid process, it's exactly the opposite of what you're thinking, at least in terms of opposite of our goals. So let's pop into that. I don't have control over the slides. Yeah.
Nope, that's me.
Are
Let
you
me know.
controlling them?
I'm controlling them. Let me know when you move forward.
Awesome. Can you draw?
I can.
Sweet. I might ask for some annotations at points.
Perfect.
So when we look at Scrum as just some sort of not just a framework, but like this is our process. We do this, we do that, we do the other thing. You run the risk of turning your team into a bunch of robots. Love this graphic here. You just got a bunch of people kind of marching along, keeping their heads down, don't rock the boat. And I see this a lot where, especially in daily scrums, and drop a note in the Q&A if this is your problem, if you have any questions about it. But a daily scrum where everybody shows up, it's very mechanical. Everybody says, what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and do they have any impediments or not. They report this status to, I don't know, project manager, scrum master, your boss, somebody. And everybody leaves that meeting feeling like they had to do it. And wow, what a waste of time. Right there, that's an example of what it feels like to be using Scrum as some sort of a rigid process. What we really like to see happening in a daily Scrum is people looking at their sprint goal and seeing where they're at currently and coming up as a team with the answer, are we on track to accomplish that goal or not? If not, let's get back on track immediately. That's the point. So when people are aware of why they're there and they're aware of what the purpose of that event is, it becomes a very different event. Jason, you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think I've frequently made an analogy to a daily scrum as a football team's huddle. And I'm talking American football, not what the rest of the world calls football and Americans weirdly called soccer. That a football team quickly gets together and looks at their goal, looks at their progress towards it, and gets on the same page. And that probably takes a lot of different forms. I've don't think I've ever been in a football huddle. I'm sure everyone on the webinar is shocked by that, but I have a hard time thinking that everyone on the football team goes around and answers the same three questions every time in those 30 seconds or whatever it is they have. Like they just figure out their process towards a goal, whatever form that takes, and it may look different huddle to huddle, and the same thing is true. And of course, we're using the daily scrum as a specific example of this, but zoom out, broad picture. That's what we're talking about here when Scrum is a rigid process. It's like, no, we have to follow A, then B, then C, then D, and we can never deviate from that rigid process.
Yep. Yeah, I just saw a note in the chat. Somebody had said that, no joke, they had a 90-minute daily scrum. I mean, if you have a really big team and you make it mandatory that every question must be answered, the three questions, it's going to take a while. And
Yep.
everybody's going to check out and be looking at their phone while everyone else is speaking. And it's my turn. This is what I did yesterday, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
That's a waste of time meeting. We all know it. So let's focus on the point. Look carefully at the point of each of the Scrum events. They're there for a reason. Once you've accomplished that problem or solved that issue, the meeting is over. You can close the time box out. So moving on to the next sort of topic, using Scrum as sort of a way to reveal problems. That is a big part of what Scrum is designed to do. Some people call it kind of like a meta framework, where you figure out what your process is on the inside, Scrum wraps around it and helps you make improvements. It helps expose problems so that improvements can be made. There's even a section in the Scrum Guide that explains a little bit about that. But if you think of Scrum as a tool to help you find problems, you use it differently rather than, oh, this is the way work must be done. We must follow this script. Common problems you find when you use Scrum are, oh, wow, it's really difficult to actually produce something of value in just a couple of weeks. That's a problem then. Solve it. In Waterfall, there's no pressure to produce anything soon. We have something of value when the entire Waterfall project is done. That could be 6 months, that could be 2 years in the future. But again, no value is delivered. Now, for those of you who were on Waterfall projects when ChatGPT came out, what, in like the end of 2022, did you adapt or did you just keep on building what you were building because you had sign off? I know a lot of companies have been changing their plans with the advent of these new tools and upskilling their workers and changing how they operate, changing the features that they offer. So Scrum gives you this ability to constantly look at where you're at and make changes. So think of Scrum as a way to audit what you're doing. So on the slide here, it says managers should really stop asking if you followed all the rules of the daily Scrum and had it happen, but more, did that help the team align and did that help you adapt your plan going forward? Um, so anyway, rigid process, watch out for it. Scrum is designed to help you find problems so that you can improve the things that you do to deliver more effective outcomes.
Cool. Cool. And yeah, to that example that we've been using the, applying this fix where you look at Scrum as a flexible framework, not a rigid process. Well, if your daily Scrum or any event it becomes mechanical and boring and ineffective, then you look at ways to change it up. I've been on teams where we change up how we do our daily scrum every single sprint, just as a way to keep it fresh and experiment. I've also been on teams where it's like, thou shalt not deviate from these questions, or you've committed some scrum foul. There's the football reference again. So looking for that flexibility and experimentation, not just rigid process. All right. So misfire number two, powerless or absent product owner. Um, the product owner is a role, it's an accountability, it to be fulfilled, and it's one that carries a lot of weight behind it. I frequently make the analogy to someone steering a vehicle, whether that vehicle is a car on a road trip or a ship on the ocean, insert vehicle here, but the driver of that vehicle carries a lot of power. And if the product owner doesn't have the authority to make real decisions, they may be fulfilling that accountability in name only. So, and that's going to have some big impacts because I get some pushback sometimes. It's like, well, why does that really matter? Like, you know, Sandy is the product owner, and sure, she has to run the major strategic decisions up the flagpole, I've heard it said, or up the hierarchy, or bounce it off stakeholders A, B, and C. But what does that really matter? Like, she's still the product owner. Well, what that means is you're going to have delays, right? When you get a new piece of information, when, again, the road trip analogy, you're driving down the road and you see ahead that there is a traffic jam, right? An empowered driver is going to say, okay, I'm going to take an alternate route, right? But if someone has to bounce that decision off of one, two, five other people, go to a steering committee, no pun intended, um, that's going to cause a delay and make us more or less effective, more prone to just sit in that traffic jam. Okay. We might fail even to build an increment. The whole point of Scrum, if you reduce it to a sentence or a phrase, is to build an increment of value, something that you could release into a customer's hands, hopefully will frequently release into a customer's hands. And if at the end of the sprint, all we've done is, move some things forward, but we have nothing deliverable, nothing usable, nothing releasable, we don't have that empiricism cycle that we saw a couple slides ago, where we have real transparency, opportunities to inspect, and opportunities to adapt. And so if I have a product owner who can't actually make those strategic decisions, can't decide on their own, for example, to add some new items to the product backlog, or reorder some items, or clarify some items, or just move in a different direction altogether based on the feedback we're seeing, that may impede our ability to make a usable increment. And then finally, just the strategic disconnect. The product owner should be crafting the strategy of how we navigate towards the product vision. If someone else is holding the product vision and someone else is holding the product strategy, and the product owner is just kind of taking care of the paperwork, so to speak, making sure there's tickets in our system or items on our product backlog, then we have a strategic disconnect. If you've ever labored to do something without fully understanding the bigger context of why, you know what that feels like. It's frustrating. You sometimes make poor decisions, not because of your own fault, because you didn't understand the bigger context behind what you're being asked to do. That can happen when the strategy is taken out of the Scrum team, out of the product owner's hands, handled by somebody else in a back room somewhere, and the product owner is just supposed to manage the day-to-day business. It's not how the product owner role is designed. And so the fix for this is really to connect the empowered product owner at the center of these things. The product vision, the stakeholders, the Scrum team. Doesn't mean that the product owner is highest on the hierarchy or the team boss in some way, but they do have an important role to fill that requires them to sort of synthesize all this information, what the stakeholders inside the business want, what the stakeholders outside the business want, customers, users, what our analytics data is telling us, what our competitive analysis is telling us, what the market trends and the technology trends are telling us, what the internal Scrum team is telling us, and the vision that they've crafted. All of that is giving them information, and they chart the best path, synthesizing all that information. So product owners has to have real authority to make decisions, deep involvement with the entire business, or at least around that product. And it has to be the right person. I've seen people voluntold to be the product owner because we need someone to manage the backlog. Bob, you do it. If Bob doesn't have the business knowledge and the understanding of how stakeholder A has a different perspective than stakeholder C, and stakeholder B wants something completely different and doesn't have the skills to navigate that, Bob's not going to succeed, the product's not going to succeed. So if your product owner doesn't have that authority, you got to grant them and empower them to have that authority. Any thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, just around this idea of choosing the right person. It's so common that the person we choose as the product owner doesn't either have the authority or doesn't have the honestly the background to do the job well. So if you hire somebody to just be a backlog manager, you're going to get limited results.
Hmm.
Especially if that person reports to the person actually making the decisions, but they're never available.
Yep.
So I look at that person as almost like the effective product owner is that one making decisions, but are they available? Are they working with your team? If not, usually decisions are made late. We don't have information we need. You run into a lot of problems. So yeah, two
Yeah.
ends of the spectrum. A product owner you never see that's very qualified or totally underqualified, totally underqualified and available all the time, but isn't really much more useful than ChatGPT writing your user stories.
Yeah, and that proxy pattern, if I want to make sure we're not casting too much despair here, you might find yourself like identifying with that, like, ooh, that's me. And I don't know how to just snap my fingers or click my heels, another Wizard of Oz reference, and just empower myself and gain those skills, right? So that proxy pattern, I'm not mad about it if it's an understood intentional thing on the way to your empowerment. Like, let's say you just joined this company, you don't have deep knowledge on the product yet. Okay, maybe I'm not going to grant you the authority to make huge sweeping decisions on your first day. And so for a little while, you are going to be this proxy pattern. But like, what's the end of that? How do we have a clear plan to get you that knowledge, to get you those skills you need? And in the short term, maybe I'm bouncing some of the big strategic decisions off somebody else. Okay, that's a temporary state. How do we move forward through that? What's our planned end date of that happening, or how do we trail that off overall? That's if you find yourself in that position, craft that plan. And it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it. Apply empiricism to that as well. Moving right along. Third misfire, the siloed team.
Siloed teams.
Tell us about that, Rob.
Yeah. Well, so the reason for siloed teams is there's probably many. It's common for Scrum to get applied at organizations that have what I would call more of a traditional org structure, like a center of excellence. So, like, there's the Department of Engineering, the Department of Quality Assurance, the Department of Design, and hey, let's use Scrum. Hey, we've already got these teams. Awesome. You guys are a Scrum team. You guys are a Scrum team. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move work from the design Scrum team in design sprints to the engineering Scrum team in engineering sprints. QA, I mean, you know where I'm going with this. You've
Hmm.
basically taken Waterfall and given it some new labels.
Hmm.
So that's one problem. Another problem, I mean, high level, what we're saying here is groups of people that are information silos and are only capable of doing one type of work. So they can't truly get to done increments by the end of a sprint. But more on how that happens or how that comes to be, it could also be around how you've defined a product. If I define our database as a product, then I have a database product owner. Then I better get a bunch of people who know how to build a database. And lo and behold, I built another siloed team where an increment of a database might not make your customers any happier because they don't directly interact with it.
Right.
So
Can I share a quick story,
yeah,
like
yeah.
a real world story? So I was part of a consulting team hired by our client to help them build a software application, a web application. The existing application, its technology was going away, deprecated. I think it was written in Flash, and Flash was being decommissioned. And so they said, we need this, same app, but in a newer web technology. And our team, lived and breathed Scrum, and we wanted to do this end to end, like we want to build the whole app. And the client said, well, we have API developers in our team, but what we don't have is the UI skills that you guys have. So you guys just build the UI. Okay. And if I've lost you, if you're not your software, your background is in software, you guys just build the stuff you see in the website, the stuff you click, the stuff that the browser draws, and we'll handle all the data access later. And so we really caution them against this. Like, this is not going to be the best thing for you. This is not the way we prefer to work. We'd prefer to go end to end so you have a usable product at the end. And it's like, no, we don't want to do that. We'd rather just focus on the UI. So we that's what we did. And so we kind of just put in fake data and fake API calls and figuring they would fill out the rest later. That engagement ended, and over a year later, we ran into the person who hired us to do this. And we said, "Hey, how's that new web app working?" And the response was, yeah, we've still got the UI you built us. We haven't actually finished connecting it to our data yet." Right? They've been sitting on it for a year. And so like we felt good about the value we deliver, but the reality is we didn't deliver any end-to-end value. They didn't get any end-to-end value out of it. They just invested in one piece of the pie being ready when the rest wasn't there. And that's the danger of having, we were a silo team. We were just doing the UI. And those were the constraints placed upon us, unfortunately. So that's what we're talking about here. When you can't deliver end-to-end value, it can feel really productive. Look at all this stuff we've built, but it doesn't actually solve any business problems. It doesn't actually produce any real usable value. Keep going, Rob.
No. Yeah, great story. Teams run into this problem a lot. I mean, the idea of over specialization, some of the problems that it really causes are around incomplete work. By incomplete, I mean, hey, we've got a house with a frame, but I don't have any walls or plumbing, so I can't live in it. Well,
Right.
great. All your carpenters worked really hard. So without diverse skills, you're less likely to build rooms that people can live in, kind of building on this house analogy, and more likely to just build layers of the stack where I can't use anything until all of it is complete. And those were the problems we had with waterfall development. Long time horizons, a lot of risk accumulates, low value delivery until everything is finished. So this is it's a really common problem, and some people like to call it hybrid Scrum waterfall. I mean, it goes by a lot of names.
Waggle.
Um, Waggle, yeah. I mean, it, whatever the name you use. Well, I just look at what I mainly look at are results. How long does it take to go from an idea to reality where a customer can use it? If that time horizon is more than the length of your sprint, you got some work to do.
Hmm.
But another problem that this siloization creates is around visibility. Hey, when's your thing going to be done? When is my new version of my product going to be done? If we're operating in silos and we're all at different stages, it creates the same visibility problems you have with waterfall. We're like, well, they're partially complete and they're 80% complete, and this team over here is 20% complete. But what does that really mean for shipping the new version of my product? It means
Yeah.
nothing. So it can lead to a lot of transparency issues around progress.
Or in my case, we were 100% done with a feature, right? But it was just the UI. There's no
Yep.
reality behind it. So there was just this mismatch of visibility. It felt like we were farther along than we really were. Keep going.
Yeah, and loss of agility is the last thing I'll pick on with this. When we are dependent on other teams to do work, that can we can get us a little bit stuck. So I do my piece of building on your user interface example. I build the user interface and I give it to the people that are writing the business logic, and they start working on it and they realize, oh wow, I can't connect to your user interface the way I expected, and they send it back to me and they disrupt what I was just working on. So now I got to go back and work on something I played with 2 months ago. I fix it, I send it back over. Then it gets to testing and they realize it's a problem, and now it's back to me again. This is not a nimble team. This is one that's like stuck in the mud. It's very difficult to get out from some of those situations with all the handoffs and the dependencies and the passing back and forth. A class I'm teaching actually just today. I'm taking a break from class to do this webinar. We were talking about a group that does translations. They're doing the translations after they're doing the build. So sprint is 2 weeks. Translation is anywhere between 1 and 6 weeks. If you
Mm,
have to translate work to ship it, your effective sprint length just became 2 months. What if you finally release after 2 months and realize you put some offensive translated language in there? It
yeah.
took you 2 months to figure that out now, and now stop the presses, interrupt our new priorities. So, agility comes from rapidly learning and adapting. When you're stuck in the mud, you're not going to be rapidly learning and adapting.
So how do we
Mic
fix
drop.
it? Mic drop.
Yeah. So how we fix it? There's a couple ways. We got a couple identified here, but let me start with this one. Be careful on how you identify your product.
Mm,
Get a team together that is cross-functional based on your definition of a product. If your product is to build a fully functioning house, I want carpenters, plumbers, concrete experts. If my product is carpentry, then I've just got a bunch of people who know how to cut wood and hammer nails and do all that kind of stuff, but not able to provide end-to-end value. Now, let's say I do have this cross-functional team of home builders. You might start with specialists. Johnny's a carpenter, Susie's a plumber, and that's all they know how to do. Okay, fine. At least we don't have dependencies on a third party. What's even better, though, are people that have a mix of skills. I've got a plumber. They're great at it. But you know what? They can swing a hammer and pound a nail into a board if they need to. Or my drywall person knows a little bit about finished carpentry. And so what we start to see are people that can help each other out to solve problems. So if somebody's stuck with a bit of plumbing work and there's a lot of that to do, somebody else can jump in and help them. It doesn't mean everyone on your team can do every type of task. It just means that we have some flexibility between the members on that team so they can pitch in and help in when necessary. Every once in a while, I see a quarterback on a football team run into the end zone and score. They don't have to pass the ball. So even on football teams, you see flexibility into how they can get the work done.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, those are
Plus one more football references.
yeah.
I'm not going to comment because that's out of my depth.
Go Bears.
Boo. Rob is in Chicago and I'm in Milwaukee, which is Green Bay Packer country, for anyone who knows of that rivalry that I clearly care very much about. All right, so what to do? So we've talked about three misfires. We've talked about the fixes within each one. So just kind of summing it all up. If you are finding that Scrum has become this rigid checklist, and here's something I would look for just as a little bonus tip. I've been in a team before where we were highly experimental. I would say we were the opposite of this. This is the same team I mentioned earlier that was changing up our daily scrum all the time, and we were changing up how we're tracking our work in the sprint backlog and the daily scrum. And there was an outside observer who had also used Scrum. They were in the same office, but they weren't the same Scrum team. And I heard the phrase, "Oh, I'd never let my team get away with that." And it was something that I thought was actually helping the team. And we had arrived at empirically. It wasn't some like, oh, somebody cut a corner or someone's being lazy. It's like they're trying something new and finding value out of it. That mentality to me was Scrum as a rigid process because this person who made the comment kind of had in their mind, this is exactly how Scrum must be implemented, rather than Scrum is a framework and you can try and experiment with a lot of different things within that framework. Okay, so if you find yourself in that situation, try to help your team see that Scrum is not that rigid process that defines take two steps, turn 90 degrees to the left, take three more steps, turn 90 degrees, but it provides a minimal framing the same way if you talk a lot about carpentry and building a house. The framing of a room provides the bounds, and then you build and put in whatever you want inside of it. And you might try one paint color and then switch it out. You might try one lighting fixture or some plumbing fixture and see if that works for you. And if it doesn't, you can swap it out. You're not destroying the framing. You still have those boundaries, but you can experiment within it. So find ways to experiment. And that word experiment can get people unstuck. It can be scary to say we're going to destroy this process for all time. It's a lot less scary to say, what if we experiment with this one? What if we just try it differently and see what happens? Just this one for now, and then build on that. Powerless PO, as I said before, you can't just click your heels or snap your fingers and suddenly empower yourself. So look for ways to get more decision-making authority. And if you have those shorter feedback loops that Rob was just talking about, if it doesn't take you 3 months to see the results of your decisions, that's going to really help. If I can make a decision today and we can see in less than 2 weeks or whatever your sprint length is, what the results of that decision are, people start to let go of holding on to all the authority away from the product owner and start to empower the product owner more. And then finally, your siloed teams. You may need to suggest changes to your team structure. You may need to say, you know what, instead of having only UI experts on this team, we want to have some full stack developers or some middleware and database experts, or let's get away from software for a minute. Maybe we're making marketing materials. Maybe we have a marketing team. Instead of only having graphic designers and no one who can write the copy, the text, we're going to put the copywriters and the editors and the graphic designers and the videographers all on the same team so we can rapidly use those skills to develop fully usable marketing assets and see how that goes. Sometimes it's an experiment, but in my experience, the result of that experiment is a lot more agility, a lot more flexibility, a lot more value produced, a lot less waste produced. And if you make that happen, everybody else looks around and says, I'll have what they're having. And then the cross functionality grows. So, to sum it up, imagine we've talked a lot about football teams. Imagine whatever professional sports team you want. They're not going to be a successful team if the coach has to follow a predetermined script every game. It's too complex for that. They need a flexible framework, and they have lots of choices within that framework of how to move forward. If the team captain has no authority to change the play when something unexpected happens and they just have to do what they're told, they're not going to be a successful team. They need an empowered leader. And if the roster all has all quarterbacks but no defense, or again, fill in your favorite sport, team-based sport here, um, they need a cross-functional team. They need team members with different skills who can leverage those skills together to achieve their goals. And ideally, people who are not single skilled, a defensive player that if they catch the ball, they can act as though they're on offense for a short time. Those T-shaped people we talked about. So Scrum isn't about just following the rules and doing what we're told and single skills. It's about building that adaptive team that can play the game and win. With that, I think we're ready for some questions, and I've seen quite a few pop up. Um,
Okay.
and go ahead. Yeah, Lindsay, welcome back.
Hello.
Not that you
Oh.
went anywhere.
All right. So we have a number of questions here, and we have
Yeah.
time for more, so keep them coming.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go right down the list. So let's start off. So someone had asked, said that they're trying to adopt safe like methodologies, and it feels a lot like the checklist approach that you mentioned. Can you talk about how this thing applies to things like safe? I don't think we'd spend a ton of time on this question, but
All right.
wanted, others might have
Yeah.
this experience as well.
I can throw some info on that one. So I'm not an expert in safe. I have read up on it over the years. I know they keep versioning it with version numbers. I'm not sure what number they're up to at this point. Um, and I honestly I can't speak to how much they consider safe a meta framework like you would Kanban or Scrum, which are designed to wrap around your existing processes to make them improved. There's a lot to safe. Yeah, it would be very difficult to comment on that. And uh, maybe I
I can
should just
comment.
not.
Yeah. I can comment a little bit. I will say that I've experienced what you've experienced. I've used Safe many times, but I will also say to be very charitable, I think you can do that with any framework. I think you can take any framework and turn it into a rigid process. If you lose the forest for the trees, if you focus on, okay, this is step one, this is step 1A, this is step 1B, and it always must follow this pattern, right? I think you can do that with Scrum the same way you can do that with Safe. I think a hammer can be used to build and a hammer can be used to harm. So, it's more about the mentality and the flexibility and the experimentation and the mindset of experimentation. That sounds very vague and lofty because it's like, well, just install a different mindset, but like keep pushing towards experimentation. And what if we try this one different when needed? So I don't think it's inherently that safe devolves into a checklist as much as, the more boxes or things you have, the easier it is to fall into that. You just have to have intentionality to keep that experimentation, that agility in it.
Yeah, I want to throw something in there, kind of building on what you're talking about. While I'm not an expert in safe, if you go back in time a little bit, there was I'm going to drop this name into the chat. NUMMI, Nummi, I believe I'm spelling it right. It's an acronym, but it was about a joint venture between Toyota and General Motors. I want to say it was in the 80s, give or take. Basically, I think Japan wanted access to the American market, and the Americans wanted to understand how the Japanese were doing what they were doing because, I mean, they went from a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy in the 1950s to one of the largest, most successful automotive companies in the world. So through this partnership, what ended up happening was Toyota rehired a bunch of people that GM had to lay off from this plant. Same people, retrained them with a bunch of different ideas, had them focusing more on the principles of the Toyota production system. And they then invented a system there that became very successful for that plant. General Motors basically copied and pasted their exact way of doing things, not the principles, not the ideas, not the culture, the exact things they were doing on a day-to-day basis and forced it onto a different plant. It was met with rejection. It did not work well. Because they didn't understand the principles and the practices, they walk through the motions, but it just did not end up with the same results. So I imagine safe without adhering to the ideas and the principles under the covers makes the process a lot less meaningful.
Yeah,
So look it up, Numi. There's many case studies written about this, but good to know if you guys are in the agile space, some of the history of these ideas that have ultimately become what we do today.
cool.
Great. Thank you. All right. So, next question here. So, the bigger problem I have seen is a tyrant product owner, rude, demeaning to the team, swearing, and abusive. But so valuable to the organization, the company decides to keep hiring new developers as the old ones get fed up. Same can be true of Scrum Masters, of course. How can you help this situation?
Oof. Um, that's rough. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. I don't think you're describing a Scrum problem necessarily. I think you drop someone who is abusive and cussing out the team into any framework, and your problem is a people problem, and a leadership problem. Because if you put up with toxicity just because, well, they're so valuable, we'll just keep burning out our people and getting new people, like that's going to cause you a lot of problems. So. I do think Scrum gives you some tools to try to address that, um, such as the focus on transparency of results. Every time you burn people out and they leave and you bring someone new in, that's going to hamper your results. And if you look at why is our attrition rate so high and why, we were on track to meet this goal, and then suddenly we slowed down. Well, that's because we lost half the team in after Jim's latest tirade. Uh, so I mean, I think retrospectives also help. The courage is the Scrum value. The courage to tell someone that's not acceptable, will help. Team working agreements, not formally a part of Scrum, but it's a popular complementary practice that I recommend for any Scrum team or any just team of professionals, period. Crafting a team working agreement and saying these are our team norms, these are the behaviors we find acceptable and aspirational, and these are the ones that we don't. Um, I think this Scrum framework provides that transparency and opportunity to inspect and adapt that, like we said in the earlier part of the presentation, it doesn't solve your problems for you, but it does give you problems to shine a flashlight on the problems. It sounds like you've got some problems swept under the rug, and the rug needs to be rolled up, and a flashlight and perhaps some caution tape need to be put around the things swept under there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just make a quick comment. Sometimes really successful companies have really terrible cultures,
Hmm.
horrible with people. And if you've got a line of people out the door waiting to work there, they're never going to stop doing it. Where you do have limited talent to work with, treat them well because it's going to affect you if they all leave on you.
Yeah.
I personally like working for companies that treat people like people. So I'm probably not going to work for one of those terrible cultures. But they do exist, and I'm sadly I can't say that it always leads to terrible business performance. It certainly can, and it does, but not always.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I hope that helps. So next question, what is your take on the PO also being Scrum Master?
I love this question. You want to start, Rob? I've been sitting.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing against it. There's not a rule against it. The main thing you got to worry about is focus. Do you really have time to do both jobs well? If so, or if that's all you can do because you don't have somebody else to do one of those roles, okay, just realize you're going to have a focus issue and you're going to probably be pretty busy.
Yeah.
A lot of times people see the Scrum Master role as more like a paperwork secretary. And so it sounds like I can do both of these because what do I got to do? Run a meeting? That's not hard. That's not the point of a Scrum Master. A Scrum Master in and of itself can be a full-time job, much like being a product owner can be. So if you want to take both roles seriously, just watch out for the focus issues.
Yeah, I tend to give a caution against that. Not like Rob's exactly right. There's no rule against it. Um, I have seen it be effective in rare cases. Typically, when I've seen that pattern, one of the accountabilities is the focus, like Rob said, and the other is an afterthought. And the reason is the perspectives are so different. I mean, oversimplifying a bit, the product owner has a very external focus, the marketplace, the customers, the outcomes, and the Scrum Master has a very internal focus on the health of the system and the self-management of the team and the effectiveness of the team. And so it's very hard to balance those two well. Um, I don't balance that well. I try not to handle both of those roles because I get much more energized on how the team is doing and the internal focus. And so I probably won't give the product owner accountability the time and focus it deserves. Um, and I've seen the opposite problem as well. So sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes there's no one else to do it. If I found myself in that place, I would look for someone else on the team to become one of those roles as quickly as possible. Probably the Scrum Master position would be easier to get someone trained up. I'm not saying the Scrum Master accountability is easier than the product owner accountability, but I've seen that pattern more often where there's a developer who's really also interested in the Scrum Master role, and it's like, great, let's upskill you, let's get you whatever training you need, let me pour into you, coach you, mentor you, whatever, and then try to hand that off to you, and I can just focus on being the product owner, and you can be the Scrum Master, or vice versa, I suppose.
Great, thank you. I hope that helps. All right, moving right along, we have time for a couple more. So this one here, I work as a PO in a mechanical engineering company engaged in development, which was acquired by an IT, it says concern, I don't know if that means company.
Hmm.
Um, from above, we were instructed to implement Scrum. Excellent, but despite training, the team continues to view it as a niche IT system. We are headed for failure because Scrum is difficult to implement if everyone is not ready to change the way they work and accept the Scrum values. Do you have any advice on how I can help my colleagues improve their opinions?
I love this question. Can I go first?
Go.
All right. So here's the thing. Scrum came from hardware development. All right. So let's think about that for a second. What? Scrum came from hardware development. There's a paper out there called the New Product Development Game. Read it. It talks about research done in the 1980s about a bunch of companies building hardware. NASA building space shuttles. It was either Nikon or Canon, I can't remember, building cameras. Honda Motor Company building cars. I think printers or copiers from Xerox, if you
Yeah, I
remember
think
what
you're
that
right.
company is. Anyway, I might be
Good.
getting a few of these wrong, but read up on it. It talks about how the more successful companies worked. Scrum was heavily inspired by that paper. So if you just forget Scrum for a second and go to the ideas that you find in that paper and you want to invent your own system, it might look a lot like Scrum, but the things that made those teams successful from that paper primarily were managers exercising subtle control, meaning they set expectations, they provide tools, but ultimately get out of the way of the team doing the work. The teams were more cross-functional. The teams were capable of solving problems. And so you don't see all the mechanics of the Scrum framework in this paper, but you see a lot of really, really good ideas.
Mhm.
When you've got mechanical engineers working with the people writing the software directly, we have a much shorter feedback loop. So even if you don't use Scrum, just getting your engineers to talk to the software people, or you said an IT concern. So I'm not exactly sure what disciplines you're working with there, but if we can get a cross-functional group of people to work together to solve these engineering problems, you're just borrowing a great idea that came from that paper. And, I wouldn't say they own the rights to that idea. Scrum leverages that idea. But once you get some of these concepts in place, decide if Scrum as a framework is right for you. And if it is, you've already got the building blocks. You got the cross-functional teams. You got self-management. A focus on delivering in small batches is another big piece that you can really benefit from, even doing hardware engineering. So those are my tips.
Yeah, it's not just I get why people think of it as an IT process. Being a proud nerd myself, I often joke about it. Oh, that's just how the nerds manage their nerd work. And that's the reality is it's how we solve problems, and it's how we learn. Empiricism is about learning by doing. And I was working with a company making generators. right? Not a software app that you release in patches over time, but they needed to update how their home generators were being serviced. And their traditional process was just to redesign the circuit board to provide all the capabilities. And we started using ideas of Scrum where we said, okay, we want to add one capability. We want to add Bluetooth capability. And so we just add that capability. Now, did we go mass produce all the circuit boards? No. We rapid prototyped it and we had simulation tools and that was our increment, right? And then we added in another capability. We wanted a cellular capability. And so we did that. And then and that rapid feedback loop really provided a better design than the traditional model of let's just design all the things at once. And it also allowed them to stop at any point and ship it if they needed to. So if you frame it that way, it's about helping us learn quickly and provide more options. I think you'll see a lot better uptake than just treating it like a software design paradigm because it's not. It's not just for software.
Okay.
Time for a couple more.
Yeah. So, how do you turn an I-shaped person into a T-shaped person in an efficient and effective way?
Mm, yeah. How do you take someone who is a specialist in one area and broaden their skills? It sounds counterintuitive because it sounds like this is the result of it rather than the cause of it. But for me, I've sort of broadened my T, if you will, just by being on cross-functional teams and working with specialists that I didn't have exposure to in the past. So I think of the first time that I was on a Scrum team, again, software development background. The first time I was on a Scrum team, not in general, but the first time I was on one with a UX designer embedded on the team. I learned a lot about UX design. Did I walk away being an expert in it as the woman I was working with, Kate? I didn't walk away from that team having her level of expertise, but I learned a lot by working with her and the rest of the team. And it also was because she didn't just take all the work for UX for herself. She led the team in design activities. And so if you can work with cross-functional teams and not have everyone just take their specialty, but lead team activities, everyone learns a little bit and grows those skills to the point where you can flex outside of your specialty as there is a need. And then of course just the traditional upskilling methods of going to training and things like that and just being intentional about that, identifying I could have more skills here. It would be helpful if I develop this area and try some things, experiment with it. But don't wait until you have perfectly shaped people to build a cross-functional team. Build a cross-functional team and have them work together in collaborative ways, and that will naturally help that grow as well.
Okay. Right.
Maybe one or two more.
Okay. So, this might be the last one because it's a big question, but I
Got it.
think it sounds important. So, and all your questions are important, by the way, and we will share any open questions with Rob and Jason and figure out a way to address them because we
Yeah.
do have a lot of questions open. So, our organization no longer has Scrum Masters. They didn't really do a good job at educating people on what it was meant to be,
Mm,
and we're having some issues as a result. Any advice on how to keep the accountabilities without having someone in a formal role?
mm,
Yeah, I can go on this one. Uh, I mean, in my opinion, the accountabilities were never well. The way it's currently written, the accountabilities are just the ingredients you need on a functioning Scrum team. You don't have to have a separate job description to be a product owner. You just have to be the person that can maximize the value. In terms of a Scrum Master, you're just the local Scrum expert that helps advise and teach and coach and improve the effectiveness of your Scrum team. You don't need permission to do that. So if you are just trying to get work done and your job title is Senior Engineer 3, but you happen to see the value in the Scrum framework, you might make a good resident Scrum expert and de facto Scrum Master for your team, if you can be a true leader to your team, meaning people like your ideas and follow you. So no one has to appoint you to be Scrum Master. We just need these kinds of experts on our teams to help us be more effective.
yeah.
Um, so that's my thought on that.
Serve and lead where you are. You don't need a title to exert influence. Um, Start doing the role of the Scrum Master without you can't devote 75% of your time to do it. Like ostensibly, if you are that senior engineer three or whatever you just said, Rob, like you still need to do that role as well. But if you can find ways to improve the team, that's how I started as a Scrum Master. I wasn't hired into a role. We were trying to use Scrum and nobody was fulfilling the role. And I said, I'll do it. This stuff interests me. So I'm going to point out systemic problems. I'm going to point out opportunities for us to improve. I'm going to, serve the team to help us all be better. And then again, when that's done effectively, you make your own business case for why someone should be doing this, even if it's just part of their role.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we need to start wrapping up. Like I said, we are going to figure out a way to get those questions addressed. Are there any final words that you want to leave the group with today before we
Hmm.
leave?
Yeah, well, all these ideas, I don't know if we mentioned it, came from
Oh, right.
a paper that we put together, basically like seven of the most common Scrum failures and what you can do to fix it. So we'll send you guys whatever you registered with your email. We'll send you that document. It's got a bunch more tips and tricks and stuff that can
Yeah.
help with Scrum in the wild. And honestly, yeah, we're Scrum trainers, but 99% of what we're doing is fixing Scrum problems that exist in the wild because a lot of people already use Scrum. So this is a topic we're both pretty passionate about. So do feel free to reach out to us. I mean, you know our names. We're easy to find. So happy to
Sweet.
help.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, everyone. And this has been a blast. Thanks, Lindsay.
Okay. All right. So thank you everyone for joining today. Hope you got a lot out of this. I know that I did. And keep an eye out for future Scrum Pulses and Scrum On.
Bye.